We all remember the big games that changed everything. Like Super Mario Bros. Changed everything. Doom changed everything. Tetris, Command & Conquer, Street Fighter II, Ocarina of Time, Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, Final Fantasy VII, Pokemon, Half-Life, Halo, Grand Theft Auto 3, The Sims, Resident Evil 4, World of Warcraft, Skyrim, Minecraft, Last of Us, Breath of the Wild. Each changed everything. How did those come to be? They didn't appear in a vacuum, that's for sure. A problem with most retrospective content on YouTube is that it's so hyper-focused on the singular title, most creators fail to see the forest through the trees. Doing the series the way I've done it has forced me to pull back. Look at the picture as a whole and see where the pieces fit. How the moment of ideas and design cascade on each other, leading to the next work. And as I dove into the Minish Cap, I noticed something. Something not seen at first, but obvious once you recognize it. This game changed everything. We didn't know it. We didn't see it. We couldn't see it. Not until we zoomed out to see the context of the game within the greater timeline of Zelda titles. Not until more games came out in the 20 years following it. Zelda was on a path, a charted trajectory that even the more original out-of-left-field titles kept on. There was a formula, and though it appears at first glance that Minish Cap sticks well within the bounds of that formula, I can see the clear delineation from the path, a fork in the road. A direction needed to be chosen, and Minish Cap stroked a new path for the franchise to forge ahead on. When you play the game, you can clearly see it today. How ideas were lifted and taken straight into Twilight Princess. How future titles were influenced by the seemingly innocuous choices made by the development team at Capcom, led by this man, Hidemaro Fujibayashi, who himself would be hired by Nintendo, and the first Zelda game he would lead would be Skyward Sword. A game whose overworlds, dungeon design, and item ideas would have both originality and direct inspiration from Minish Cap. It could be argued that Skyward Sword is a spiritual successor to what Minish Cap birthed. A new sheriff is in town. Aonuma is still the guy in charge, and he has big ideas for open worlds and emergent gameplay. Fujibayashi would be the instrument to execute on that grand vision. After Skyward Sword, he would direct both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Games that would change everything. But if it wasn't for the Minish Cap and the work he did for Zelda at Capcom, we wouldn't be here. In 2003, Nintendo was in trouble. Game sales in Japan weren't growing. The market as a whole was flat with a slight decline. Sony and Microsoft were eating their lunch on the home console side. The Game Boy Advance, though, that was going strong. It was the only area showing growth for Nintendo. Link to the Past with Four Swords released on the GBA in December of 2002, and Wind Waker released on the GameCube in Japan that month, with the North American release occurring 3 months later in March of 2003. While Wind Waker was a success at launch, sales dropped off really quickly. It didn't have legs. The core fan base accepted it as a great Zelda title, but it failed to convert other players. The Link to the Past port, on the other hand, was considered a success. Miyamoto liked the Four Swords multiplayer idea, and knowing that the next mainline game was going to take a while, he wanted Aonuma to oversee a multiplayer game on GameCube using the Game Boy Advance connection functionality. Thus, Four Swords Adventures. At this time, Aonuma was getting tired of directing Zelda titles, and he kinda wanted to be done. But Miyamoto had a better idea. Put him in charge of all Zelda games as the main Zelda producer. This would pull him in several directions. There was a Wind Waker follow-up, which was having trouble getting off the ground. Capcom was working on another handheld Zelda title after the Four Swords success, and now the Four Swords Adventures. Things were getting hectic. Sadly, Four Swords Adventures failed to capture audiences since it required everybody to have a GBA and the connector link to play. It kind of made the game prohibitively expensive in a way. In addition to that, the new mainline realistic Zelda was not off to a good development start. The team was struggling. All eyes turned to the handheld division. Sony was eyeing the handheld market and was poised to release the PSP at the end of 2004. Nintendo was developing an idea to counter it, but it was a bizarre Hail Mary. One that would really pay off, by the way. In the meantime, they needed to sustain the profitable handheld they had now, and they needed a marquee title for the 2004 holiday season. Aonuma was told to redirect his attention towards Flagship, that Capcom subsidiary. In 2004, he'd step in as a producer/co-director with Fujibayashi to help steer the project to maximize success. But he didn't have much to worry about. Aonuma even said, "Having set the framework for this new direction, my work was required on another project. I left the Realistic Zelda team to work out the details and began work as director on the Minish Cap for the Game Boy Advance, which Capcom developed. In hindsight, by immersing myself in the Minish Cap project, I gave myself a way to escape from not being able to find a breakthrough on the Realistic Zelda." This kind of explains the staleness of Twilight Princess. It's still a good game though. I like it. I digress, this is about Minish Cap. Fujibayashi was spearheading development from the Capcom side, and he was ambitious. He wanted to create something that hadn't been done before while also making a 2D Zelda game to end all 2D Zeldas. It was going to be the pinnacle of 2D Zelda and would feel like it belonged among the 3D entries to the series. He also wanted to make something distinctly Capcom and show off their incredible pixel art skills. Fujibayashi knew he needed to build a Zelda world off an idea, or a MacGuffin, so to speak. His words, not mine, or at least maybe a poor translation of his words. We'll talk about the MacGuffin later. One of the Zelda tropes was the idea of two worlds, light and dark, past and present, forwards and reverse. 4 seasons? Okay, that's 4, but you get the idea. A lot of ideas had been done. He wanted to do something new. He found inspiration from a random comment from Miyamoto. Miyamoto playfully suggested one time, "Wouldn't it be fun if Link got inside a treasure chest to create some mischief?" This reminded Fujibayashi of the Nat Hat from Four Swords, and how fun it was to see a little 2-pixel-tall Link run around. The words big and small came to his mind. Normally in Nintendo, they explore their ideas by making prototypes with simple shapes and blocks. Fujibayashi went a different route and worked with Flagship's concept artist to create artwork to communicate his idea. When sent to Aonuma, he loved it. He told Fujibayashi to run with it. He was ecstatic about the direction of the game. Aonuma said, "Maybe it sounds strange for me to praise my own game like this, but the designers at Capcom are really quite amazing. They've expanded the world of Zelda for us once more." A hat would allow Link to shrink, and the hat would be the companion character to guide the player through the game. To make it relatable and obvious that the hat was talking, they gave him a bird-like beak. The game was coming together. The Minish Cap would be an end-of-cycle release for the Game Boy Advance, releasing just 2 weeks before Nintendo's experimental handheld, the DS, hit store shelves, which also included a GBA slot for backwards compatibility. It would make it in time for the holiday season in Japan, but unfortunately be delayed till January of 2004 for the US. It would have decent sales, but wouldn't set the market on fire. Although, Fujibayashi would change the course of Zelda design with this often overlooked Game Boy Advance title. Fujibayashi uses the term MacGuffin, which can be a bit confusing because it's not exactly the right phrase. Getting the pendants, elements, medallions, those are MacGuffins, an item that kind of drives a quest forward. Instead, I'm going to use the term hook to describe what he's talking about. Each Zelda game has a hook, an idea and mechanic or mechanics that the bulk of the game is designed around. Each Zelda title has a different hook to help differentiate each game from the others. The Legend of Zelda was designed around exploration. Zelda 2, sword combat. Link to the Past, parallel worlds. Link's Awakening, Zelda on the go, I guess? Or item combination? Yeah, we'll go with that, item combination. Ocarina of Time was music/adult-child timeline. Majora's Mask was music/time loop. Wind Waker, music/sailing/wind? Oracle of Seasons, changing the seasons. And Oracle of Ages, time travel. Again, but more fleshed out. These games that came before created ideas and formulas that would help define Zelda. But not all of these games used their hook to the fullest. It makes it kind of hard to incorporate the adult-child idea fully when it was introduced more than halfway through development. Fujibayashi would set the gold standard for Zelda Hooks moving forward with his big and small, and four-sword splitting ideas. Both would be integrated into the whole fabric of the game, from overworld to dungeon design. No area would be left untouched by its influence. The big and small mechanic is introduced early in the game on your way to the first dungeon, where you meet Eslo, who is a tiny wizard that was turned into a hat. He's that companion we talked about earlier. And with him, you can use portals strewn about the world to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids yourself to have adventures through Hyrule. With this idea, the world itself doesn't change, but how you interact with the world drastically does. Puddles become impassable oceans, if you don't have the flippers. New areas can become accessible only in Minish form, and creative workarounds have to be discovered to overcome what is now a large obstacle. This creates new puzzle ideas to stretch the player's approach to navigating the world. The big, small dual world idea was also something that other games couldn't really do. It was incorporated into the dungeon design itself. Puzzles and traversals would require you to think and grow to reach new areas of the dungeon to progress, and 2 dungeons would require you to shrink down to Minish size to even enter: Deepwood Shrine and Temple of Droplets. Then there's a sword splitting idea. As you progress, you power up your sword, which can be used to clone Link on these glowing pads. At first, you can make 1 copy of yourself, then 2, then 3. This is used to push large blocks, hit switches simultaneously, and other puzzle ideas. And once again, it would be woven through both the overworld and the dungeons. The big and small idea and the cloning mechanic would be incorporated into the many boss battles as well. Deepwood Shrine and Temple of Droplets are done entirely in the Minish state, and the bosses of each are actually normal, weak overworld enemies. It's a fun way to recontextualize Link's small size and reapproach what normally is a standard enemy. Fortress of Winds has Mazel. Hey, a head and hands boss again! Hello, my friend. Mazel has a fun approach to this Nintendo trope. You disable the hands, shrink down, enter the head, dig around, and beat the snot out of a central core processing unit. The Guy Orb pair in Palace of Winds utilizes the cloning mechanic to clone yourself in the right sequence to poke him in his eyes. The Vedi fight at the end brings it all together, with the cloning mechanic and the shrinking mechanic for each phase of the boss. Having the hook fleshed out from the very start allowed the developers and designers to incorporate them into the whole game, in every area, every dungeon. From here on out, the hook for Zelda games would be better integrated into the whole of the design. Some will do it better than others, but after almost 20 years of Zelda games, the standard and processes are defined and set in place. Let's face it, Zelda items were getting rote and stale. We were getting the same items in each game with little invariance or new ideas. Boomerang, bow and arrow, bomb, slingshot, hookshot, hammer, meal shield, Pegasus boots, iron boots, power gloves. We've all seen them before. Ocarina of Time had a fun flying twist with the Pegasus boots, and Wind Waker gave us some of the most original item ideas with the grappling hook and Deku Leaf, but other than that, Each title may have a new twist or approach to the standard item, but we weren't getting many new and interesting items. That is until Fujibayashi. We saw with the Oracle games how he recontextualized some ideas with the magnetic gloves, switch shot, and the seed shooter / slingshot. He added an expansion to the Rock's Feather by upgrading it to the Rock's Cape for a higher, longer jump. Those games breathed new life into Zelda staples. Minish Cap would continue the trend for originality. Yes, the staples were there. Boomerang, bow, bombs, lantern, and Oracle of Seasons Rock Cape would come back. But new items would debut. The Gust Jar, Cane of Patchy, Mole Mitts. And while the Pegasus boots aren't new, the recontextualization isn't something we'd seen in Zelda yet. Before, they were primarily used to smash objects with the force of Link's speed combined with a sword. This time around, the speed is used to run on top of the Muddy Swamp and Castor Wilds. Being able to attack with a sword would be a combat upgrade from a Swordmaster. It's the Gust Jar, Cane of Patchy, and Mole Mitts I really want to focus on. The Gust Jar has quickly become one of my favorites for how it's used. Retrieved in Deepwood Shrine, it's used to grab these launching mushrooms from afar to fling Link across large gaps, and is used as propulsion to move this leaf around on the water. You can also use jars as projectiles with it, and to clean dust off the floor, and to disable some enemies. The Cane of Patchy is used to flip objects over, which can open up portals to the Minish world, and open up new paths. It can be used against some enemies, and also create a launching point and holes to throw Link up to higher elevations. The Mole Mitts are a recontextualization of the shovel. Yes, you can dig holes to find things, but now you can dig through dirt horizontally as well, opening up caves and clearing paths to find treasure and objectives. And, as is tradition, the dungeon items are still required in the boss fight. Outside of combat and dungeon puzzles, each item is used to open up more of the overworld end map, revealing new areas, finding secrets, and creating shortcuts. Nothing is left on the table. Just about each item has multiple uses between traversal and combat. The ideas are used to the fullest, and creative ideas are implemented into the overworld to ensure the item's use case is fully utilized in exploration. A new standard was set, and we'll see the Gust Jar and Mole Mitts make their 3D debut with Fujibayashi directs his first 3D Zelda as a Nintendo employee in Skyward Sword. Link to the Past and Link's Awakening played around with three-dimensional concepts in a top-down perspective, but did so in a rather limited way. Link to the Past would have the player drop down into different areas of a dungeon from the floor above, by taking note of how floor holes could line up with the known floor plan on the level below. Link's Awakening did something similar with Eagle's Tower, by dropping one floor into the layout of the one below it. But this isn't what Fujibayashi had in mind when saying he wanted to make a 3D feeling top-down 2D Zelda. With Capcom's expertise at creating beautiful pixel art, he would play with dimension and exploring the vertical space in dungeons not seen before in a 2D Zelda, even if he would continue the trend of more linear style design set by Aonuma's team in The Wind Waker. I want to take a moment for an aside to pick on Mark Brown from Game Maker's Toolkit. He did a series of videos a while back called Boss Keys, where he played through each Zelda game and analyzed their dungeons and how they were designed. Using graphs for their layout and solution, he categorized dungeons into one of two types: follow the path and find the path. If you watch his videos, it's obvious he prefers dungeons with the find the path design, while admonishing the follow the path formula. And I understand why. I personally agree with him. It's a more satisfying puzzle to solve, like untying a large knot, as Mark Brown would describe it. I agree with him, but I do find it to be a bit dismissive of the perks of Follow the Path. One of the big perks is how Follow the Path simplifies presenting, expanding, and twisting dungeon-specific mechanics. Let's take a look at Deepwood Shrine. You are presented with this mushroom that you pull to fling yourself over an otherwise uncrossable gap. The farther you pull, the farther you're flung. The length you need to pull is telegraphed by the scrapes in the ground, but if you pull too far, you'll just hit the wall and be fine. The next time you see the shroom, there are two scrape marks. You may pull it all the way back to be flung as far as possible at first, but you'll overshoot a section. If you pull only the length of the shorter mark, you can be flung a shorter distance. If you don't pull back the right amount for either of these, you could find yourself in the water hazard, so you're learning. The next instance you have to pull just right. Too far or too short, and you're in the water. In the shroom right after, there are no scrape marks to telegraph how far you should pull back. You have to use your intuition and other visual clues to pull the right amount. Then once you get the dungeon item, you can grab the mushroom from a distance with the gust jar. With Follow the Path, you have a clear line of progression with the mechanics and the puzzles that are contained within those mechanics. Blocks and keys act as a skill check until you master the idea before moving on to the next challenge. I don't believe either is better or worse, they're just different approaches with their own merits and drawbacks. I believe the main question to ask when it comes to evaluating Zelda dungeon design is it interesting? Does this crunch? Does it feel good to do? Does it feel good to solve? I once again want to digress. What I really want to talk about is how the team at Capcom was able to incorporate ideas that felt like they belonged in a 3D Zelda. Coming back to Deepwood Shrine, it had a spinning barrel in the center that you had to burn vines off to enable it to spin and open up new paths from the central room. Cave of Flames gave us the Cane of Patchy, which flipped objects over and launched Link from one level to the next, giving a sense of height and verticality to the rooms. Fortress of Winds used dirt and the mechanic of the moments to create labyrinths and expanding and contracting spaces. The boss fight here is still really cool, having to shrink down and enter his head to defeat him. It plays a lot with space and size. Temple of Droplets has you traversing up and down the dungeon on the east and west sides to open the ceiling to let the sun thaw out the dungeon's boss monster. And Palace of Winds, though incredibly linear, plays heavily with verticality and ascending higher into the sky. The boss fight also plays with that vertical depth idea. All of this is supported by excellent sprite work. The designs and bold colors make the elements pop. Combined with the interesting dungeon ideas and mechanics makes for a fun and engaging Zelda dungeons, even if they lean more into that follow the path philosophy. You have to still understand the dungeon as a whole in order to solve the level, especially with Fortress of Winds and its multiple levels. We'll see Twilight Princess really play around the space and traversal in its dungeons, and you can see Fujibayashi's design sensibilities and philosophies really take shape with his approach to Skyward Sword, which also has bold, colorful design that makes the aesthetic pop. Minish Cap was able to accomplish interesting and unique mechanics with simple yet impressive 2D artwork and design. If it weren't for the ideas presented here, I don't think we'd have gotten the unique and interesting dungeons of later Zelda games, especially those of Skyward Sword, which, believe me, that game has its drawbacks, but I absolutely love the dungeons in that title. This is the biggest directional change the Minish Cap contributed to the Zelda franchise. The Overworld was always a large place to explore with a questline to follow to unlock the next dungeon, and it was mostly a more adventure game design. Talk to the right people, get the right object, and give it to the right person. Each one was a trading quest of some kind, and in the case of Link's Awakening, there was an overarching trading quest that was a through line through the whole game. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask added some mechanical and puzzle design elements to these quests in addition to the MacGuffin hunts that opened up each dungeon, sometimes in the form of a mini-dungeon like Under the Well or Pirate's Fortress, where you had to retrieve items from the Overworld to unlock the path to the dungeon like the item, mask, and song formula Majora's Mask used. Minish Cap took some of those ideas and turned each questline to open the dungeon into a puzzle/dungeon to solve in and of itself. Going through the Minish Woods to Deepwood Shrine is very straightforward, but the path to the next dungeon, Cave of Flames, requires more from the player to get there. You have to ascend Mount Cranal. At its base, you'll see some vines you can climb, but lead to an immediate dead end. You need to water the seedling next to them to advance. Once you get your first bottle and grow the seed, you begin your ascent. You pass a wall that looks climbable, but you don't have that capability yet. You'll have to navigate the maze of Mount Cranal, bombing walls, entering caves, and floating on the winds with your hat till you come to a spot with a hole and a green beam you can only access as a Minish to take to the hole. But you notice it's green, not blue. It takes special green hot spring water to grow, which you may have seen earlier. Find your way to the green water, get it, return to the bean, and continue your ascension. You'll then find a Deku shrub who'll sell you power grip bracelets that allow you to climb the climbable sections of the mountain. This does two things. It opens up more of the mountain and now creates a shortcut to bypass the maze you just traversed and quote-unquote solved. You now head to the top of the mountain, fling yourself across the gap, solve a boulder block pushing puzzle, and climb down a ladder to enter a cave. Go through more caves, solve more boulder and block pushing puzzles to finally get to Malari's Mines and open up the path to the Cave of Flames. After you finish Cave of Flames and you have the Cane of Patchy, ascending the mountain is now a lot easier and more straightforward. Your first ascent looked like this. Now, if you ever need to go back to the mines, it's a straight shot. Since you solved the maze, retrieved new items, and pushed some boulders over, your reward is simpler travel. We'll see this again in Castor Wilds, the quest to retrieve the flippers to get to Temple of Droplets, the Graveyard, Vale Falls and Cloud Top, traverse the labyrinth, create shortcuts once an area is solved to streamline traversal, get a new item. The Overworld is a dungeon-like maze with simple puzzle elements. As you solve the mazes and gain more items, shortcuts are created and traversal becomes easier and easier. Previous games did elements of this. Link's Awakening is the most obvious in similarities, but even Ocarina of Time had shortcuts that could be opened up that took you from one end of the map to the other as you expanded Link's arsenal. But Minish Cap is the most fleshed out thus far, and it brought the dungeon-solving ideas into the Overworld and quest design. We'll see this again with Skyward Sword and its more linear overworld design that also creates shortcuts in its regions as you solve the maze, and we'll see it in Breath of the Wild. Take for example reaching Zora's Domain. You can't climb over the mountains because of the persistent rain. You have to follow the path. But once you're there, you can unlock the shrine for quick travel. The ideas presented in Minish Cap will continue to be implemented into the design of the future titles. There's quite a bit I didn't even mention about Minish Cap here. The Kinstone quest, the frickin' figurine collection, the Tiger Scrolls. They kind of fall outside the purview of the main idea. Except for Tiger Scrolls, which do add new moves to Link's sword fighting abilities, we'll see that idea immediately in Twilight Princess. And full disclosure, I didn't even interact with the figurine quest. I was so very uninterested in the idea. And from what I gather, it's a pain anyway. But it's the larger elements, the overarching philosophy and ideas and mechanics that I'm seeing have huge impacts on what makes a Zelda game a Zelda game. Fujibayashi really changed it with his title. He took the core concepts established by Miyamoto and expounded on by Aonuma, and he made them his own, while still maintaining that magical feeling of a Zelda game. He added his own twists on old ideas. He reinvented staples by incorporating the hook of the game more into the design as a whole, and injected new, fresh ideas to keep the franchise moving forward to remain being on the cusp of innovation and fun gameplay. It's no surprise that after this game shipped, Fujibayashi would leave Capcom to join the ranks at Nintendo. While he isn't immediately given a Zelda title of his own to direct right away, he was a sub-director on Phantom Hourglass, and then made a director for Skyward Sword. And eventually, obviously Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. His unique sensibilities and philosophies can be seen right away. While Skyward Sword is criticized for being too linear in its design, we can clearly see why it went that way with his approach to laying out the Minish Cap. And even though Breath of the Wild is an open-world game that can be tackled in whatever order the player chooses, you can still see elements of his design philosophy in the quest lines. Minish Cap changed everything. It's obvious. It charted a whole new path for the Zelda franchise and charted a course for a collision of seismic proportions that in 2017, when Nintendo would absolutely need it the most, proved that they still got it.